Most men think a woman starts testing a man when she is unsure about him, but the uncomfortable truth is that many of the most confusing tests actually begin the moment she starts catching real feelings. And that is exactly where many good men lose their balance without even realizing it. Because when her emotions start growing, her behavior often becomes more complicated, not less. She becomes a little warmer one day, a little distant the next. She becomes curious about your life, but also slightly challenging. And the worst part is this: if a man does not understand what is happening in that moment, he often reacts in ways that quietly destroy the attraction that was just starting to grow. The core problem is simple but painful. A man thinks he should become more accommodating when a woman gets emotionally closer, but the hidden truth is that emotional closeness often activates a natural process where she begins observing your strength, your boundaries, and your emotional stability more carefully. And if he starts chasing reassurance instead of staying centered, that is where respect begins to slip. So, in this conversation, we are going to slow this down together. By the end of this video, you will understand why women sometimes become more testing exactly when they start liking you. You will see the emotional pattern behind these moments that confuse many men. And more importantly, you will understand how to respond without losing your dignity, your clarity, or your emotional strength. If you appreciate honest conversations about relationship psychology and male self-respect like this, you can support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. It simply helps more men find this kind of clarity earlier instead of learning these lessons after years of confusion. Now, the first thing you must understand is something most men never hear clearly. Emotional testing is rarely about manipulation. In many cases, it is about emotional safety. When a woman starts developing real feelings for a man, her mind begins asking questions she may never say out loud. Can this man handle pressure? Does he lose himself easily? Will he collapse emotionally if I challenge him a little? Can I respect him long term? And this is where the confusion begins for many men, because when the energy between you becomes more emotional, you may start interpreting every change in her behavior as a threat. If she replies slower, you wonder if she is losing interest. If she questions something you did, you wonder if you are disappointing her. And inside your mind, a quiet pressure begins to build. You tell yourself you just want things to stay peaceful. You hope she will go back to being warm and easy again. You start adjusting your behavior slightly. You explain yourself more. You try to avoid small disagreements. But this is where men accidentally make the first mistake. They think passing emotional tests means keeping everything smooth. In reality, passing these moments often means staying emotionally steady even when things are slightly uncomfortable. And this is the part nobody explains. The first kind of test often appears as emotional inconsistency. One day she seems excited to talk to you. She's engaged, curious, playful. Then suddenly her responses become shorter. She may take longer to reply. Her energy becomes slightly cooler. Now, many men panic at this moment. They send more messages. They try to revive the conversation. They ask if something is wrong. They start performing emotionally, hoping to pull her warmth back. But what looks like distance here is often observation. She is watching how you handle emotional uncertainty. If you become anxious and start chasing reassurance, it signals that your emotional center depends too much on her reaction, and this is where attraction can quietly weaken. But if you remain calm, continue living your life, and respond normally without pressure, something different happens. You communicate stability, and emotional stability is one of the most powerful signals of masculine security. Another test appears through small disagreements. A woman may challenge something you said. She may question a decision you made. Sometimes it may even feel slightly unnecessary or exaggerated. And inside your mind, a quiet thought appears. You wonder if you should just agree to avoid tension. Many men choose peace in that moment. They soften their opinion. They adjust their position slightly. They try to show they're flexible. But what looks like kindness can sometimes feel like uncertainty. And here's the deeper psychological layer. Respect often grows when a man can express his perspective calmly without becoming defensive or submissive. So the real test is not whether you avoid disagreement. The real test is whether you can hold your perspective without losing your emotional control. You do not need to argue aggressively. You do not need to dominate the conversation, but you must show that your identity is stable. Another pattern appears when she becomes curious about your boundaries. She may ask questions that sound casual on the surface. Why are you still friends with that person? Why do you spend time on that hobby? Why do you need time alone sometimes? And this is where many men accidentally abandon their own lives. They start adjusting their routines quickly to prove loyalty or interest. They reduce time with friends. They become overly available. But what looks like devotion can sometimes signal something else: loss of self-direction. And attraction rarely grows towards someone who abandons their life to orbit another person completely. What women often observe in these moments is whether you maintain a balanced identity. Do you still respect your time, your interests, your responsibilities, or do you slowly collapse your world around her presence? Another test appears through emotional vulnerability. Sometimes a woman will share something personal about her past, her fears, or her experiences. This moment can feel intimate and important, and many men make a subtle mistake here. They immediately try to fix the problem. They give solutions, advice, explanations. But emotional connection is often built through understanding first, not problem solving. So the deeper observation here is whether you can stay calmly listening without trying to control the situation. Can you stay emotionally present without trying to manage everything? Because emotional maturity often shows itself through calm listening, not immediate answers. Another moment appears through attention imbalance. Sometimes she becomes slightly less available. She may take longer to reply. She may not initiate conversation as often. And inside your mind, your ego begins whispering something dangerous. You start measuring effort. You start calculating whether you should withdraw attention or give more attention. But this mental tug of war often pulls a man away from his natural energy. Instead of staying grounded, he begins reacting to every emotional change. And this is where the real mistake quietly destroys attraction. He stops acting from his identity and starts acting from her behavior. Emotional leadership disappears. What many women are unconsciously observing in these moments is whether you maintain your rhythm even when the emotional climate changes. Are you steady or are you reactive? Another test appears through future conversations. Sometimes she will ask questions that touch your direction in life. Where do you see yourself in a few years? What kind of life do you want? What kind of partner fits your world? These questions may sound casual, but they reveal something deeper. She's exploring your sense of purpose. Many men answer these questions with uncertainty because they're afraid of sounding too serious. But clarity is not pressure. Clarity is direction. When a man speaks calmly about his goals, his values, and the kind of life he's building, it signals something powerful. It shows that his life has movement, and attraction often grows towards a man whose life has direction. The final pattern appears in moments of emotional tension. There may be a misunderstanding, a disagreement, a moment where feelings are slightly hurt. And this is where many men fall into one of two extremes. Some become defensive and argumentative. Others become overly apologetic and self-blaming. But emotional strength often shows itself through something simpler: calm accountability. If you made a mistake, you acknowledge it clearly without collapsing your self-respect. If you didn't make a mistake, you explain your perspective calmly without aggression. And that emotional balance communicates something extremely powerful. It shows that your dignity doesn't disappear when tension appears. Now, here's the deeper realization behind all of this. Emotional testing is rarely about catching a man doing something wrong. It's about discovering who he is when the emotional atmosphere changes. When things are easy, anyone can appear confident, but when the situation becomes slightly uncertain, that's when true emotional identity reveals itself. And this is why the biggest mistake men make is trying to perform perfectly instead of staying authentic and emotionally grounded. Because attraction is rarely built on perfection, it's built on consistency of character. So the mindset shift you need to carry from this conversation is simple but powerful. You are not trying to pass a test,